How's it going, everyone? It's Alex with Optimum Joy, and I have Pete Marlow here. And Pete is actually here to talk with us about catastrophizing, which I think is a fun word, generally speaking. But Pete, tell us about catastrophizing and why it's kind of come up in your work recently with people.
Yeah, so I've noticed that many of my clients with anxiety were sharing their anxiety really centered around these types of catastrophizing thoughts, just thinking the worst possible outcome is going to happen, basically is what it is. It can be really overwhelming for a person to the point where they can't think rationally anymore. And then they just really cement this catastrophe scenario after a while as like the only possible outcome in their mind.
So basically, like minds go to worst case scenario. Like I start here
Yep.
and I immediately go to what's the catastrophe that could happen. So
Yeah.
what even like triggers catastrophizing, triggers these type of thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, studies have shown it can be connected to fatigue. And obviously, it stands to reason that if you're feeling tired, then your brain is unable to keep these types of thoughts at bay. Um, so
Mhm.
they also have been linked to anxiety, depression, OCD. So if a person is struggling with depression, then that would lead to higher feelings of hopelessness. If you already feel hopeless, your brain could be more likely to jump to catastrophizing thoughts, since why wouldn't the worst case scenario be the most likely one?
Yeah. Honestly, the fatigue piece is hitting me in a certain type of way because I notice within my
Yeah.
own self when I'm run down,
Hmm.
I am so much more of a black and white thinker instead of nuance. And I very often, it's kind of hardwired into me, probably some of my own anxiety and my own survival mechanism from like trauma or whatnot, is I
Yeah.
very often will think, what's the very worst thing that can happen? But I
Hmm.
more so do that when I'm tired. And I'm thinking about how fatigue, even with anxiety, depression, OCD, those things you mentioned, is like those things wear down your system actually. So
Yeah.
even your brain is actually more tired um, to kind of jump to like that extreme type of thinking, anyways. So
Yeah. Yeah. It just doesn't have the energy for it. But
yeah, which kind of is unfortunate because it takes energy to correct a catastrophizing thought. So
exactly.
it's kind of like a loop
Yeah.
that takes a little bit to break. So if you're already tired and it takes energy to fix it, that's kind of a bummer. But
Right. Right.
like
Yeah.
I guess maybe before we kind of get into like, okay, how do you fix a tired loop of a catastrophizing brain? It's like,
Hmm.
I'm just curious, kind of for the people listening, is like, where does this come from? How do they like form in someone's mind? How do you get to a catastrophizing thought?
Yeah, I mean, like a potential scenario could be, so say you're at a party, you're talking with a group of people that includes a friend of yours and someone else they know. You tell a joke that didn't really land, and the conversation just keeps moving, but that joke that didn't land sticks in your mind. Um, and then once you get home, you easily recall that conversation and think, like, did that did that joke offend the other people? What if your friend no longer wants to be your friend? And then your mind goes to, then your friend will tell everyone else in your friend group uh, about that and like about your offensive joke. And then all of your other friends won't want to be your friend anymore either. Then finally you'll end up like lonely without any friends.
Mm,
Uh, yeah, but honestly, it could just be a bad joke, which happens to everyone, even professional comedians. Like
yeah,
joke didn't land.
yeah. So that's like I hear the extremeness in your example. It's like, okay,
Mhm.
I maybe just had like an off delivery of a joke at a party, and now I have no friends.
Yeah.
Not only do I have no friends, but I have a reputation as being an offensive person. Like
Hmm.
start from here and to get from there. Honestly, when you say it like that, it's like, of course that's not true, but in our minds, that's true.
Yeah.
I started here and I came here. So what do you like if that's what happens,
Yeah.
how do we help that not help happen for people?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's some strategies that you can utilize with your counselor. So mindfulness is one of them. Like an example of an exercise that you can do is picturing yourself sitting by a stream, and you can just observe your thoughts as leaves that are floating on top of the water. Um, Typically people don't jump into the stream and grab the leaf when they see it, like you wouldn't. So you just kind of let you just peacefully let the leaf float by. You can do the same with your thought. Yeah, you can just observe the thought, acknowledge that it exists, note how the thought makes you feel without judging it, and then just, yeah, watch it float by.
Hmm. Well, what's nice about that is the rapidness of I tell a joke, I have no friends.
Hmm.
That mindfulness and so many other things like that actually is like, let me just slow it down and take a true look at it. Is that really true? What's really going on? Instead of, I told a joke, I have no friends.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, given time to process it.
Exactly. Yeah. What else?
Yeah, so there's cognitive behavioral therapy. It's been shown to be really effective with treating these types of thoughts. So basically, just CBT looks at how, or the way we interpret events, meaning what we think of an event. Um, and that causes us to alter our mood and our behavior. Yeah, so this process just helps you put your thoughts on trial, so to speak. Basically, you're putting them on the witness stand. You can do things like consider the evidence and ask a question like, is this situation, I'm sorry, is this thought based on emotions or facts? Or what would I tell a friend or a family member in a similar situation? Um, yeah, and then you basically work through that whole process of like, okay, well, here's what I would tell my friend. Oh, okay, maybe I am thinking irrationally here, and then it's easy. You just come up with an alternate thought at that point.
Yeah. That's one of my favorite when it's hard to be compassionate to our own selves, or
Hmm.
like when in our own mind something makes like immediate sense, like this happened, so this must be true. I
Yeah.
think that the process of, okay, if my friend was in this exact same situation, which is outside
Hmm.
of me, and I'm looking at it, so it's externalized, that
Yeah.
that process in general just increases compassion because what
Hmm.
would I say to this friend? Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, I didn't even notice that your joke was bad. Honestly, I was listening to the music. Or, like,
Yeah.
of course I love you. And so
Yeah.
it kind of puts us in that position of how do I respond to myself as a friend and to myself in a more compassionate scenario?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like the gold standard for that would be if you have children, like what would you say to your kid?
Mm.
Like that's kind of the kicker. But
Oh gosh, well, something we're not going to get into today is that brings up all internal family systems and how do you be a good
yeah,
parent? How do you be an internal parent and
yeah,
parent yourself? Well, we're not going to get into that,
yeah, right.
inner child and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Something that I know you and I have talked about in more kind of like OCD tendencies
Hmm.
is like intrusive thoughts, catastrophizing can be part of that. And
Hmm.
you and when we were running through this before was telling me about like worry time and how worry
Yeah.
time can kind of be a way to combat some of that. And it's also one of my favorite things to tell people with anxiety. So tell us about worry time so that other people can maybe incorporate that.
Yeah, it's really simple. So basically what you do is you designate some time at the end of your day, 15, 30 minutes or so, to just worry. Like that's exactly how it sounds. And then just during the rest of the day, when you have worrisome thoughts, like catastrophizing ones, you write them down in a journal, save them for your worry time later on. You can also use like the mindfulness exercise with the leaf floating by in that moment, just to allow yourself to get through that moment and get to your worry time. um, yeah, and then honestly a lot of times when you get to the end of the day, your worry time, like you'll forget what you were even anxious about, or you'll look at it and go, why was I anxious about that? And oftentimes you're going to give yourself 15 to 30 minutes, but you probably won't even need that 15 to 30 minutes.
Yeah.
uh, yeah.
Yep. And that's really too, I mean, a big part of that is like I'm thinking of two things as you bring that up. Part of it is the intensity of a thought and the feeling that's associated with it. Just because it's this intensity when you're thinking about it doesn't really mean it's going to stay this intensity throughout the rest of your day. It's probably up, it might go a little higher, it might get a little lower, it might drop because you're thinking about something else. And
Yeah.
part of the first thing is, I think, just witnessing the fact that you get to the end of the day and, oh, I don't really need 15 or 30 minutes to worry because the intensity
Yeah.
is different.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just like noticing just because something is intense in a moment doesn't mean it's going to be intense in the next moment. It's always
Right.
going to be variable. But the other piece I think that goes with worry time is the self-talk,
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
anxiety, everybody's anxious, right?
Yep.
I think you and I on a different video were talking about anxiety is what makes you prepare for a test.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I have a test, I should probably study,
Right. Yeah.
So anxiety is like our wisdom of like, hey, pay attention to this. And I think
Mhm.
sometimes these thoughts is really like a, hey, I'm trying to tell you something. And I think a big part of the self-talk is, oh, I see you thought, I see that you're like wanting me to believe that I don't have any friends. That's,
Yeah.
yeah, you're basically telling me this is important to tune into. So
Hmm.
I can't do it right now, but I see that you're important. Thank you for showing up. I'm going to get to you in my worry time. And it
Yeah.
sounds funny to say it out loud, actually, but it's kind of like, I see you, I hear you, I'm coming. But right now is
Right.
not the time, and almost
Yeah.
a boundary with your own self.
Yeah. And again, like we're almost diving back into IFS again, but like you're kind of validating, like you're validating like that part of you that wants to,
Absolutely.
yeah.
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 Thank you. Thank you for showing up. Now's not the time.
Yeah. Right.
I'll see
We
you
have,
later.
right. Yeah.
I noticed too, Pete. I don't know if you notice this within
Mhm.
your work with people, but worry
Mhm.
time, some people are really good at just like remembering their worry time. But I've
Mhm.
noticed, and even for myself, when I've used this around some of my anxiety, I almost will keep a note on my phone or like a journal and literally write it down, because that
Yeah.
really helps me to be like, oh, I truly do see it for later, like I
Yeah.
literally see it on a line item and come to it later. So.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Actually scheduling that time out, blocking it out.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. Anything else?
Yeah, I mean, we talked a little bit about sleep, but I mean, it's the most practical thing you can do. Studies have shown that if you're sleep deprived, you're more prone to being hypersensitive to threat. And then the more sensitive you are to threats, then the more likely you are to see everything as a threat. Um, and yeah, that's just kind of how we're designed.
Mhm.
And if you're able to, yeah, get the sleep that you need, then that will go a long way in helping out your anxious thoughts.
Yeah. Everything you're saying, Pete, including the sleep piece, everything you've said today is, let's slow it down and come to a
Hmm.
more restful state. Whether
Hmm.
it's mindfulness or whether it's worry time or whether it's like
Hmm.
CBT, which is slowing it down, and including sleep is like just remembering how you started our conversation. Fatigue, whether it's a diagnosable mental health concern or just general fatigue, is
Hmm.
like a lack of rest. And everything you've really recommended is, how do you rest and slow down and look at some of these things? And you and I are both big believers in sleep, so I think that that's like a prime recommendation. But essentially,
Yeah.
I think that for people listening, if you're someone who catastrophizes, who goes from worst case scenario at the instantly, then this is really like slowing down and tuning in is the recommendation. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. There's a direct line that can be drawn.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, thanks so much, Pete. I really appreciate you taking the time just to walk us through that and for your recommendations for us all.
Absolutely.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah. It's great talking to you.